Pull him out. The piranhas are tearing him apart. He's not going to make it. The man's scream tore through the humid air like a shotgun blast. Leaves rustled, birds scattered, and in the middle of a murky Amazon pond, blood frothed to the surface, thick, dark, unstoppable. Something was thrashing under the water. Something alive and dying. David, David, get out. A man stood on the muddy bank holding a long branch, eyes wide with terror. He plunged the stick into the water, trying to hook his friend's arm. Anything, anything to pull him out. But it was too late, far too late. By the time the first responders arrived, there was almost nothing left to pull from the pond. Just scraps of fabric, shattered sunglasses, and a camera still streaming live to over 32,000 horrified viewers. But if you think that's where the story begins, you're wrong. To understand what really happened that day, we need to go back. Back to the man who believed he could make friends with killers. Before we dive deeper, if you're someone who loves real animal stories that shock, inspire, and make you think twice about the wild world around us, hit that subscribe button now. This is Animal Story, where nature speaks louder than fiction. His name was David Carter, age 47, a quiet guy from Oregon who walked away from a successful teaching job to live full-time in the heart of the Amazon rainforest. Most people go to the Amazon for a couple weeks and come back with bug bites and blurry photos. David went and stayed for 7 years. He wasn't running from anything. He was chasing something, the untamed, the unpredictable, the wild that still bites back. He built himself a small wooden cabin just outside Puerto Maldonado, Peru. It had no Wi-Fi, no air conditioning, and no plumbing for the first year. But what it did have was a freshwater stream that led directly to one of the most dangerous ecosystems on Earth. And for David, that was enough. He became obsessed with one species in particular, red-bellied piranhas, Pygocentris natariri, small, fast, and armed with a jaw pressure strong enough to slice through bone. Hollywood turned them into monsters. David wanted to prove the world wrong. He started filming his interactions with them. At first, just short clips, him dropping food into the water, the fish swarming, but stopping short of his hand. Then he took it further, swimming in the same pond, standing waist deep while dozens of them circled his legs. Nothing happened, not once. People online went crazy. You're the fish whisperer. These are gentle, if you understand them, nature's misunderstood angels. David soaked up the attention. His YouTube channel, Man Among Predators, exploded. He gave talks. He sold t-shirts. He told people he could read the piranhas like dogs. And somewhere in that fame, something changed. He stopped listening to local guides. He ignored warnings from scientists. He laughed off comments from indigenous fishermen who told him they'll spare you until the first drop of blood. But he believed he had a bond. He'd raised some of them from hatchlings after a drought dried up a small pool nearby. He called them his river kids. And the world watched with wide-eyed wonder, right up until the day the water turned red. David Carter didn't look like your typical thrill seeker. He wasn't covered in tattoos, didn't ride motorcycles, didn't have that intense wide-eyed adrenaline junkie stare you see in extreme nature vloggers. Well, David was quiet, polite, soft-spoken, the kind of man who held the door open at the post office and knew the name of every librarian in town. Born and raised in Eugene, Oregon, he had a calm, almost meditative presence. Taught high school biology for nearly a decade. Kids remembered him as the dude who brought a live tarantula to class and made it cool. But underneath all that calm was something deeper, something restless. He once told a former student, "The wild doesn't scare me, boredom does." When his parents passed within months of each other, David sold their house, packed 2 duffel bags, and bought a one-way ticket to Peru. No farewell party, no blog post. He just disappeared into the Amazon. For most people, it was a shock. For those who really knew him, it made perfect sense. David didn't just explore the jungle, he merged with it. He learned local dialects, slept in hammocks through torrential rains, ate fried grubs and monkey meat with native tribes, traveled by dugout canoe for days to reach uncharted streams. But his heart belonged to one thing, the red-bellied piranha. Most people associate them with B-movies and horror stories, bloody rivers, skeletons pulled from water in seconds. But David saw something else. They're misunderstood, he told his followers. They only attack when desperate. They're not monsters, they're survivors. That idea, man, living peacefully among nature's most feared creatures, was a hit. His YouTube videos started small GoPro footage of feeding times voiceovers, explaining their behavior, clips of him trailing his fingers in the water like he was petting koi. He wasn't reckless at first. He used protective gloves, kept a safe distance, observed carefully. But the fame changed things. His subscriber count passed 100,000. Sponsors started reaching out. People wanted more danger, more closeness. Swim with them, one comment it read. If they trust you, prove it. Yeah. And David, like many creators before him, listened to the crowd. In early 2023, during a particularly harsh dry season, David made a decision that would rewrite everything. While kayaking along a shrinking inlet, he discovered a nearly dry pool thick with mud and scattered with dying fish, among them nearly a dozen baby piranhas barely moving. He scooped them up with his hands, kept them alive in water bottles, transported them back to his homestead pond. There he raised them, fed them protein-rich insects, cleaned their habitat, tracked their growth like a proud father. He named the largest one Red and claimed Red would sometimes swim to him when called. "They're my river kids," he'd smile. In interviews, he made it sound magical. Trust, he said, is more powerful than instinct. But the reality was, not everyone agreed. Local guides grew nervous. One warned, "They're not dogs, senor. They're teeth with hunger." A marine biologist he consulted via Zoom told him bluntly, "You're raising predators in a closed system. If food runs low, you become food." David shrugged it off. In one vlog, he responded to the concerns directly. "If I die doing what I love, it'll be worth it." And people ate it up. Hundreds of comments poured in. "This man is a legend. He's cracked the code of coexistence. This is what harmony with nature looks like." But beneath the admiration, some noticed the cracks. In one video posted just a month before his death, David approached the pond barefoot, calling to the fish. They didn't come. When he dangled a small piece of meat, they swarmed but ignored him. He laughed it off, moody today, huh? No one knew it was the beginning of something darker. The week before David died, the Amazon was quieter than usual. Birds weren't chirping, frogs weren't croaking. Even the insects, normally a nonstop chorus, had gone still. Locals called it la calma falsa, the false calm, the kind that comes right before something breaks. And something was breaking. That year, the dry season came early and hit harder than anyone expected. Streams slowed to a trickle. Fish stocks plummeted. Temperatures climbed above 100 degrees and the humidity felt like wet concrete on your chest. David's man-made pond, where he kept the piranhas he'd raised since they were hatchlings, was shrinking fast. The waterline dropped almost a foot in just 10 days. He noticed it. Of course he did. He even talked about it in one of his final videos. "So yeah," he said to the camera, sweat glistening on his forehead, the water's pulling back. "I'm topping it off every day, but we're still down." He panned the camera to show a cracked patch of earth near the edge of the pond, then zoomed in on a cluster of swirling, red-belly piranhas, their fins brushing against each other in the shrinking space. "They're a little agitated," he admitted, "but that's normal when territory gets tight. Nothing to worry about." Except it was something to worry about. 3 days later, David sent a text to a close friend in Cusco. "Red bit me today. Small nip, didn't break skin, maybe spooked." That should have been the moment he stopped. Anyone who works with wild animals knows the first time they draw blood, accidental or not, it's a red flag the size of Texas. But David brushed it off, just like he always did. He bandaged his leg, posted another video, and told his followers, "Sometimes the kids have a bad day." What he didn't mention was that he'd also cut their food rations. He was running low on his usual feed insects, bits of fish, protein supplements flown in from Iquitos. The last shipment had been delayed, and he was rationing until the next boat came. So now the piranhas were hungry, the pond was small, the temperature was rising, and David still believed he was in control. That weekend, a documentary filmmaker named Brian Ledger arrived at the cabin. He and David had collaborated before on a short doc about jaguar tracking, and Brian had pitched a new piece about coexistence with apex predators. He brought drones, cameras, a sound guy. They were supposed to shoot for 3 days. The morning of the attack, David was in high spirits. He wore his branded t-shirt, "River Kids Raised by Teeth," and greeted the team barefoot with a thermos of lukewarm coffee. They filmed him prepping fish food, talking to the camera about trust instinct and mutual respect between species. Then came the final shot of the day, David stepping into the pond. Brian later told police he wasn't nervous. He was excited. He said, "Let's show them the bond still holds." At first, the fish kept their distance. They hovered near the center of the pond watching. David stood waist-deep, waving toward the camera. "They know me. They're just waiting." He splashed the surface gently. Red, the biggest piranha, darted forward. "See, that's Red? He always comes first." Then it happened. A flicker, a blur, a flash of silver under the surface. David flinched. Brian kept rolling. He thought it was part of the show. But David's eyes changed. His smile faltered. One of them just nipped me. Another splash. Then another. Then chaos. The next 60 seconds were captured in full HD. They've never been released to the public. But according to Brian, it was like watching a blender turn loose in a paint bucket. David tried to backpedal, but the water had turned red. His arms flailed. The fish swarmed, frenzied, relentless instinct in overdrive. Brian dropped the camera and ran for the boat to radio for help. But it was already too late. The footage never aired. Not the full thing. What the public got was a 37-second edited clip posted by a third-party account. It showed David smiling waist-deep in muddy water, calling out to the camera, "Their family. They know I'd never hurt them." Then the screen froze right at the moment his face changed. The video cuts there. But Brian Ledger, the documentary filmmaker who captured the entire tragedy, saw all of it, and he still hasn't recovered. "It haunts me," he told local news 2 weeks later. There was nothing cinematic about it. It wasn't a moment of wild beauty or a cautionary tale. It was raw, ugly panic. It was a man being torn apart by something he believed loved him. The rescue team arrived 40 minutes after the emergency call. By then it was over. David's body was pulled from the far edge of the pond, or what was left of it. There were no arms, no face, just remnants of a torso, one shredded thigh, and a blood-soaked River Kids t-shirt tangled in reeds. It was ruled a death by animal attack. But for the people who knew David or followed his channel, it was something much more complicated. Was it an accident or a predictable ending? That was the question lighting up message boards, science forums, and every comment section under every news article that followed. Some fans refused to believe the piranhas had done it. There must have been a crocodile or an arapaima. They don't just attack like that. Others blamed the filmmaker. Why didn't you help him? Why didn't you scream? But the truth, cold and simple, was exactly what David himself had always said. If they're hungry, they stop being cute. And they were very, very hungry. Local biologists examined the pond days after the attack. They confirmed the water level had dropped to a dangerous threshold. The fish had doubled in size since David first raised them. The lack of natural flow meant oxygen was low and aggression was high. One expert summed it up best: he created the perfect storm, an artificial environment. No escape, no balance, just stress, heat, and instinct. The piranhas were euthanized by local authorities. It wasn't a decision made lightly, but the footage combined with forensic evidence and the rising pressure from public outcry forced their hand. A viral online campaign tagged "Justice for David" demanded their preservation. He died because he trusted them. Don't punish them for doing what they were born to do. But another voice grew louder, the one asking, why was this ever allowed in the first place? In the weeks after David's death, international news outlets descended on the tiny cabin he called home. CNN called it a modern-day Icarus tale told not in the sky, but in the murky water of South America. Documentaries were pitched. A book deal was rumored. YouTube demonetized his channel, but traffic exploded. People couldn't look away. His brother Mark Carter flew in from Oregon to claim what little remained. He stood at the edge of the pond, the same place where David had last waved to the camera, and said quietly to a local reporter, he always wanted to be part of something bigger. Maybe now he is. What remained after that was just silence. No more videos, no more live streams, just questions. What does it mean to love something wild? Is it possible to build real trust with predators? Or are we just guests in a world that doesn't play by our rules? It's been 6 months since David Carter's death. The jungle has taken back his cabin. Vines crawl across the wood siding. The solar panels are rusting. The pond, once the heart of his River Kids sanctuary, is now a still, silent basin. No ripples, no red flashes beneath the surface. Just mud leaves and a faded warning sign nailed to a post. Do not enter. Research site closed. But the world hasn't moved on. David's death struck a nerve that rippled far beyond the Amazon. In the U.S., animal rights groups and wildlife organizations began lobbying for stricter regulation on exotic animal content creation. They called it the Carter Clause, a proposed law that would require permits, mental health screenings, and ethical oversight for creators working with dangerous wildlife. Some called it progress. Others called it censorship. But behind the policy debates and media firestorms was a single question no one could quite answer. Did David deserve what happened to him? His fans say no. They flooded the internet with tribute videos, artwork, even a memorial website with the tagline, "He didn't tame nature, he respected it." Many argue he was a visionary, someone who dared to believe that love and patience could bridge the oldest divide on Earth, predator and prey. One fan posted David died doing what he loved. That's not a tragedy. That's a life well lived. But critics see something else entirely. To them, David was reckless. He played God, built an ecosystem he couldn't control, replaced thousands of years of evolution with camera angles and trust falls. Nature doesn't care about your feelings, one ecologist tweeted. If you raise wolves in your backyard, don't be shocked when they act like wolves. The debate reached its peak during a televised town hall on National Geographic. The moderator asked a panel of scientists, creators, and animal ethicists, if David Carter had never turned on a camera, would he still be alive? There was a long pause, then one panelist answered, if he hadn't turned on the camera, maybe he wouldn't have needed to prove anything. And that was the heart of it, wasn't it? David didn't just want to study the piranhas. He wanted to become part of them, to live with them, to show the world that fear could be replaced with connection. And for a while, it worked. Until it didn't. Mark, Carter David's older brother, has stayed mostly quiet through all of it. But in a recent podcast interview, he finally spoke. You know what, I used to think what he did was crazy, he said. But the truth is, he was just trying to belong somewhere. Most people go their whole lives without ever feeling that. He found it, even if it killed him. Today, the cabin is empty. The YouTube channel has been memorialized. Comments are frozen. Ad revenue goes to a conservation fund David once supported. And the pond, it sits untouched, a mirror reflecting nothing but clouds and questions. Because at the end of the day, this story was never just about piranhas. It was about boundaries. About what happens when we confuse intimacy with immunity, when we forget that wild doesn't mean evil, but it also doesn't mean safe. So let me leave you with the questions David never got to answer. Can love tame the untamable? If you care enough, can you change instinct? Would you step into that pond believing they'd remember your face? Or would you stay on the bank watching the water and wondering where respect ends and fantasy begins? Thank you for following this powerful, unforgettable story. If stories like this move you, if they make you pause, question, feel, then subscribe to Animal Story now. Because in the wild, every choice has teeth.